You can take a person out of their culture, but can you take the culture out of them? This is a question that drives the creative core of Captain America, and is something that is constantly given a different answer, for the reason that when it is determined, the character will finish in different places and carry fundamentally different messages. For the MCU, the resolution lies within Peggy.
Dude.
Captain America is a man out of time, born and cultured from one time period, but then acts within a different one. Therefore, there's one of two directions you can take him. Either he adapts and the story is about the wisdom of accepting change, or the hero can hold on and eventually return home. So the message is more about the importance of perseverance.
You're a good man, Sam. This one's on me, though.
In the comics, there's a tendency to lean towards the former. In Avengers issue 4 back in 1964, Steve's recovery was encapsulated by him being immobilized by Bucky's death and then re-energized by how Rick Jones spiritually looks like him. That's really weird. Furthermore, within Mark Waid's Captain America Man After Time miniseries, Steve does actually get sent back in time during a fight, and despite the opportunity to stay there, he chooses not to, because to see all the social progress from the modern world gone took away that nostalgia. And in the Ultimate, Steve's troubled reassimilation with the modern concluded when he accepts a relationship with Janet, and in Ultimates 2, this whole story ends with a flashback to the day before the experiment, reminding us what is forbidden and what will never be. Because conventionally, superhero comics perpetually exist in the second act, where an ending can never be truly definitive. But for film, this isn't a tradition. Endings are necessary for anchoring the preferred understanding of the story.
Maybe try some of that life Tony was telling me to get.
Cap and Peggy's story fits into the traditional hero's journey extremely well, because the process of seeing the hero leave home, enter a new frontier, and then return as a new man isn't just metaphorical, but is literal. The first Avenger is a love story that literally ends with Steve crossing the threshold. Then his initiation into the Avengers and with the modern world doubles as his narrative and thematic initiation within the hero's journey, because it takes blood, sweat and tears for Steve to face his trials, fight his old beliefs, overcome temptations, to discover his true convictions and develop his personal will. Therefore, when Civil War and Endgame arrives, he's vividly a different person who fights against what he formerly represented.
You want to stand in our way? We'll fight you too.
And goes as far as to put himself first in terms of protecting Bucky and choosing to go back in time to be with Peggy. But what does Peggy actually represent for his story? In the first Avengers, she has two important thematic functions. First, on the personal level, it contextualizes Steve's maturation because she contrasts his behavior. Peggy is defined as a decisive and mature woman who is confident in attitude, status, and goals.
Then what are we waiting for?
The right partner.
Whereas Steve is willing to stand up for his beliefs, but often gets in his own way because of his indecisiveness and is easily tempted by fame and Marjorie Tyrell.
Captain, we're ready for you.
Therefore, for him to be with her, he has to reach a level of maturity, and in hindsight, it's through this contrast of personalities that Steve's arc is actually retroactively framed. And secondly, she establishes the wider narrative theme that Steve is an outsider, because their relationship is built on shared experiences of discrimination.
Can't say no forever, right?
I know little of what that's like, to have every door shut in your face.
Therefore, when he arrives in modern day, a pattern is preserved, despite the radical changes in settings. But then Peggy's role is massively reduced and abstracted. In Winter Soldier, she's a tragically old and forgetful lady that symbolizes Steve's growing disconnect with the present, despite his honest attempts in giving it a chance. We never see her husband too, so I wonder who that is.
Even after he died, Steve was still changing my life.
Peggy also appears in Age of Ultron as a figment of Steve's daydream for closing the life he never had but deeply wished he took. She asks if he can see home, and he can't. It's an empty room, and the dance itself is only a flash, as opposed to a moment that can actually be lived in. Furthermore, Age of Ultron also serves as a strange, soft ending for Steve, because it is within this foreclosure that Steve decisively chooses to throw away any hope he had to settle down, unlike Tony and Clint, and finds peace in his never-ending war as an Avenger.
You alright? I'm home.
On one hand, this is Joss I'm under investigation Whedon's farewell to the character, and on the other hand, this is Steve finally achieving the confidence needed to move forward.
Thanks for welcoming me back.
Sure.
It takes letting go of the impossible to achieve it. Peggy then dies in Civil War, and this serves as the last straw for Steve, because the world now seems even more alien to him than before, for the reason that 2 out of 3 of his connections with the modern are now severed. Steve had found a home with the Avengers.
That's an arrangement the governments of the world can no longer tolerate.
Peggy was someone who helped shape the modern world, therefore by carrying on her legacy, he's able to be with her spiritually.
Knowing that you helped found S.H.I.E.L.D. is half the reason I stay.
As a result, Steve had to pick Bucky, and for the first time believes in himself as a man, and is this new Steve that was willing to live without a shield nor the flag, that earns the right to go home to Peggy and live as Steve, the sort of man that was needed since the beginning to bypass himself.
You must have danced.
Well, asking a woman to dance always seems so terrifying.
You're gonna need a rain check on that dance.
We can go home. Imagine it.
Gotta move on. It was beautiful.
But let's unpack this even further and connect it with the broader narrative interests of the Captain America trilogy, because at the heart of this series is an exploration of different stages of modernity. Each movie centers on a different socio-cultural, technological, and political shift, be it how the Tesseract changed World War II, how advanced surveillance technology exacerbated the modern fear culture, and how globalization impacts national and individual rights. On this merit, Peggy functions as a powerful shadow, so the audience can notice the simplicity and innocence that is slowly disappearing from every social change.
We rather mucked it up.
Peggy is more or less then replaced by Natasha in terms of being the emotional anchor for the world, but the fact that the movie chose to keep it platonic showed that this connection had its own limits, similarly with the dropped Sharon Carter storyline. Therefore, within this wider sociological picture, the conflict is derived from a tension between tradition and modernity, which is an age-old conflict that's been around since the Industrial Revolution. As Max Weber said, the emancipation from economic traditionalism appears no doubt to be a factor which would greatly strengthen the tendency to doubt the sanctity of the religious tradition, as of all traditional authorities, which is a fancy way of saying old traditional values are often incompatible with modernistic philosophies because the old ways tend to look towards the future less. But in this love story, this emancipation is burdened by emotional restrictions because Steve's nostalgia is his most important feature as a symbol. He shows us that there's something worth holding on to from the past, a certain humble and romantic sublime that is being unconsciously discarded in the name of technological and political progress. Subsequently, this is the complete polar opposite message to the Man Out of Time miniseries and The Ultimates, where nostalgia is an obstacle within his journey, but now nostalgia is the guide. Steve is a consistent line that doesn't ideologically change within a changing world. Although what makes this endearing as opposed to arrogant is the way Peggy moves this tension into the parameters of the self as opposed to the social.
The world is in our hands. It's left to us, guys.
Steve's fight to persevere is not an ongoing war with a world he refuses to accept, but is through finding a way to accept himself in a world that is slowly dismissing him. And in the end, that comes in the form of going back to her. In conclusion, I just want to say I'm very jealous of how beautiful these people are.
What are you hiding, Peter?
Has he mentioned me?
Yeah.
What'd he say?
I'm just kidding, I don't care. Bye.